We've arrived here at Revelation 20, the notoriously controversial chapter about the millennium, the thousand-year reign of Christ. And we've arrived here because we're wanting to understand the structure of how Revelation fits together. So we're not simply curious about millennium for millennium's sake or eschatology for the sake of tickling our fancy of how the end times is going to look. We want to know how the book of Revelation fits together so we make sure we understand the parts and how the different parts relate to the other parts. So my comments on Revelation 20 are rooted in how does it fit with, we said it definitely, the battle in Revelation 19 is definitely connected literarily to the battle in Revelation 20 because of Ezekiel 38 through 39. So what is the nature of that connection? I'll give you two theories. The first one, which is my favorite one that we'll talk about in this video, is that Revelation 20 fits in structurally as an interlude. So if we're following the structure that I gave here, you have an interlude within the postlude. As I said before, there's always going to be different ways to outline, and you could have Revelation 19 through 22 as its own section, and then it's not, you don't have an interlude within a postlude, you have an interlude within a major section. But either way, not getting bogged down in that, we know that Revelation does use this literary device of interludes. And so Revelation 20, from a literary structure perspective, could be an interlude. And I think actually that's the best case. If it is an interlude, then what do interludes do? What we saw in chapter 7, the interlude of the seals, chapter 10 through the first half of 11, the interlude between the sixth and seventh trumpet. And we saw what interludes do is you're telling a story, pause for a second, zoom back, look at the bigger picture. There's more. I've been telling you a story, but there's another perspective of what's going on here. So pause that story so I can tell you another story. Well, and interludes also answer a question that the text was raising right before you got that. Who can stand? The angels of God and the redeemed from every tongue and tribe and nation with the seal of God can stand. Who is repentant? It's the two witnesses are the ones clothed in sackcloth who are repentant. Likewise here, Revelation 19 raises a question. The beast and the false prophet are captured and thrown into the fire. And if you've been tracking through Revelation, you're like, wait, you missed somebody. There's another. What about the devil? What happened to him? So if Revelation 20 is we've heard about this devil, especially back in chapter 12. What about this? And that's actually one argument in favor of this view of this being an interlude is that, oh, we haven't heard about this devil who's the dragon and Satan and the serpent. We heard a lot about him in chapter 12 when he was chasing after the woman who goes into the wilderness. But then the dragon becomes furious, goes to make war on the rest of the woman's offspring. He gives his power and throne to the beast, and then we don't hear anything more about him. So he's kind of disappeared from the story. But he was in there. We know that there's this devil, dragon, serpent, and so when you hear that the beast and the false prophet were thrown into the lake of fire, it's natural to ask, oh, you forgot somebody. What about the devil? Revelation is saying, glad you asked. I'm happy to tell you. Let's go back and tell you the story of the devil. But like many, again, what happens in stories, it's not always chronological. If you ever watched the TV show Lost, it's telling one story of these guys on an island, but then at the beginning of every episode, it would start off with a backstory. And the backstory is telling you the character development of what these guys were doing years before they ended up on this island. So a lot of storytelling doesn't go through chronologically. You tell a story, and then you're like, hold on a second, let me tell you more of the backstory, and then go back to the original story now that you know the backstory that gives you the details you need to know. So if Revelation 20 is a interlude, it's the backstory of what's been happening with the devil behind the scenes and what ends up happening with him. He's the one who's not mentioned in chapter 19. Now, this view would correspond to the view of the millennium called amillennialism, that what's happening in Revelation 20 is the backstory of, in fact, what's been happening through the entire church age. What's been going on with the devil all along? Why have we not heard about him since chapter 12? Well, he's been bound. At least in some sense, he's been bound. I know people have trouble with the idea that Satan has been bound in our age. I'm definitely going to get back to that. But stick with me. Let's say that Revelation somehow, as an interlude, is saying Satan has been bound during, Christ talked in the Gospels about binding the strong man. So Christ in his death and resurrection has authority to bind the strong man. First casts him out of heaven, as we read about in chapter 12, down to the earth. And now we read, actually, he's been held in the bottomless pit until the age, and then until he's released and raises a great ruckus and brings together the nations to a great Gog and Magog end times battle. Now, the strength of this idea, and then finally everything comes to a close. Death and Hades themselves are thrown into the fire. Judgment Day, all evil is wiped out. But the one strength of this idea is that the battle in Revelation 20 is the same battle at the end of Revelation 19. That's why the same Ezekiel passage is referenced in both. There's only one battle of Gog and Magog, one ultimate Gog-Magog battle. It's the same in Ezekiel. It's one passage. Ezekiel 38 through 39. One great final battle. And so if it's the same, because the same language is being, both Revelation 19 and 20 are both appealing clearly to Ezekiel 38 through 39. And so if they're both referring to talking about a battle from the same Old Testament passage, it could very well make sense for it to be the same battle. So in Revelation 19, we hear about the battle from one perspective, but we don't hear anything about the devil. John, through the Spirit, saying, okay, let me tell you the backstory. Why didn't I not mention the devil? Well, he's been bound through most of this time until he's released, and the devil brings forth these nations to come against the broad earth, to surround the saints of the Most High in the holy city, which is the same thing we read about in chapter 19. And the beast, the false prophet, the devil are all defeated and all thrown into the same lake of fire. Now, the one big objection that people have theologically, practically, to amillennialism, the idea that Satan has been bound during most or all of this church age. And people say, oh boy, you gotta be kidding me. The devil is not bound in our age. And I think that there is a thought experiment here that is worthwhile for you. And if you still end up rejecting amillennialism, that's fine. But even if you reject it, I would encourage you to go with me in this thought experiment, because I think it's valuable to be able to see that there's something interesting here that could work, even if you end up not rejecting it. And in general, this is valuable Try to put yourself in the shoes of another perspective. And a lot of times people from another perspective are tapping into something that has, they're tapping into some nuggets of value, even if the whole thing is not valid. So even if you don't embrace amillennialism yet or after this, stick with me in this thought experiment. The very fact that we scoff at the idea that the devil is currently bound in this age could actually be a support for the amillennial view that Satan has been bound during this age, as described in Revelation 20. Because what apocalyptic literature aims to do is to turn your view upside down, topsy-turvy. You're looking at the world in one way, and it's telling you it's turning things upside down, like the Beatitudes. The meek will inherit the earth. It's turning your expectations, and apocalyptic literature is meant to challenge you. So if something comes across and it seems totally backwards to you, that may be because the idea is backwards, or maybe because your thinking is backwards, and apocalyptic literature is giving you a punch in the gut and a slap in the face and a cold bucket of cold water on the head to give you a totally different perspective. What is the totally different perspective here? You think Satan is causing trouble in the world now? You ought to see what happens when he's released to do what he really wants to do and bring war and destruction, final war and destruction, and destroy God's people on the earth. If you could only see the final battle, you would ask, if this is what Satan has been wanting to do all along, to wage a great war and destroy God's people, why hasn't he been doing it all along? Because in some sense, he's been bound. He has been bound to the extent of not being able to bring this great war upon the earth. And so the pastoral intent of Revelation 20, if amillennialism is true, Revelation 20 has a pastoral intent that when you are burdened by thinking, oh, the devil is so much in control of this world, it's changing your perspective to say, oh, if you think the devil is running rampant now, you ought to see when he really comes to power. By contrast, we're living in a time right now, the devil is not running rampant in the way that he will be, so take advantage of the time. You've got a time right now when the devil is not operating on all cylinders, giving the full intent of his destructive intent, what he wants to do. If he was when he's fully released to do whatever he wants, to make his best effort to destroy God's people in the world. We're not there. So as much as you think the devil is running rampant right now, it's not as bad as it's going to be. So take advantage of what you have now when the devil's efforts to destroy God's people are relatively curtailed and shut forth. So there is value in the amillennial thought experiment, even if you do not embrace it. There's pastoral value for your spirit to see the contrast at the relative constraint that the devil is under right now. Take advantage of it.